The obvious impact in the UK is there is a huge budget deficit, as there is in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece and elsewhere. This is causing a demand from the bankers, the financial markets and politicians that we have to pay off this budget deficit by introducing austerity measures, by cutting wages, by cutting jobs, services and so on. Of course, the budget deficit is not caused by the government spending money on hospitals or schools. In Britain, the budget deficit was caused by the government nationalising not the banks, but the debts of the banks. So the banks made huge losses and the government took those losses and made them public. So they spent our money bailing the banks out, and now they want us, in addition, to pay off these debts. So the government is now expecting us to work longer, as in Portugal, before we can retire. It's asking public sector workers, will do, to take a pay freeze. It is likely to increase taxation. It's cutting back in services, and it's doing all these other things, as in Greece, as in Italy, as in Spain, as in Portugal, introducing austerity measures. And this is going to cost jobs. It's going to affect people's livelihoods. We're also seeing the crisis affect us in other ways. More people have moved from full-time work to part-time work, not because they want to choose to do so, because they're pressured to do so. More people are working past retirement. So people who have officially retired have gone back into work. The sorts of jobs that are available are becoming poorer and poorer. And essentially the argument is that you want a job, you should accept anything. You should accept no pension, no sickness benefit, no paid holidays. You want a job, you have to accept everything. I think it's very important that working people, students, pensioners, unemployed, people in work, turn around and say, we're not going to pay for this crisis. We didn't cause this crisis. The bankers caused this crisis, the financial institutions caused this crisis. We didn't. Why should we pay? And there are a number of things which I also think we could turn around and say are worth cutting. For instance, Britain has nuclear missiles. Let's get rid of them. Let's get Britain out, its British soldiers out of Afghanistan. Let's cut that. We could cut our House of Lords, our hereditary House of Parliament. We could cut the royal family. These are all things we could do to save money, and they would not affect ordinary people. So our argument is we shouldn't have to pay. And I think it also requires people to fight back, as they are doing in Greece. Okay, how are workers reacting? I think people are angry, but I think it's potentially, I think people can also take the wrong targets. We've seen people beginning to react against migration into Britain from people from Eastern Europe and elsewhere in the world. It's very easy, if there's not a fight back, if there's not an alternative, there's not hope, people could blame immigrants. So it's possible they could go that way. It depends on whether or not there is a fight back, an alternative. And the argument in Britain is an argument between those people who still remain loyal to the interests of the Labour Party, or equivalent of your Socialist Party, or those people who turn around and say that should be secondary to the interests of ordinary working class people. Then therefore the people, the big trade unions under the Labour government, which existed up until a month ago, did not really do anything, because they argued we have to keep Labour in power, we should not rock the boat, we should do nothing to endanger that. That was a mistake, in my opinion. These same people are now saying we should wait 5 years to get a Labour government elected, let's not do anything, that's the key thing. We haven't got 5 years to wait, we have to have an argument about the need to fight back now. And I think the example of Greece is very important. In Greece, originally, the trade union said, let's wait and rely on the PASOK socialist government. It was rank and file pressure which forced the trade unions to call a general strike and demonstrations. And I think we're going to have to organise to ensure that rank and file pressure comes, that there's going to be a fight back. We can't just wait and allow this to shape. We're going to have to do what people in Greece did and make sure we begin to go on the streets. We put the pressure on the trade union leaders to call a general strike, and we take action ourselves. And I think we have to argue we need Greek-style protests. You know, when teachers in Greece take over a TV studio and their demands are read out on the air, that's the sort of thing we need. When they lay siege to Parliament, that's the sort of thing we need. In London, in Lisbon, in Madrid, in Rome, across Europe. This government is a really interesting government. It's a coalition government. The majority party is the Conservatives, the right-wing party, the hard right-wing party. it's allied with a Liberal Party. The majority whose people voted for change. That was their rhetoric. They did not vote for a Conservative government, and they did not vote for cuts in welfare spending, in jobs and services. So I think it's a weak government in that sense. It hasn't got a mandate to make these attacks. I think it's also a government which has a job in its hands. In Britain, people look back at Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher always took on one group at a time. It's like a salami tactic. She would take on one group and make sure everything else, no other fight, just one fight at a time. She built up, took on one group, and built up to take on the miners, and after a year, she defeated them in an epic battle. But she was very careful only to take on one group. This is a weaker government, and it's going to do things which affect the whole population, increasing the retirement age, cutting spending on education, asking people to take pay cuts. So it's not a strong government, and I think this is not Margaret Thatcher's second time round. The simple message is this is a government we can fight and we can defeat. But going back to the previous point, that means we have to be organised and we have to put the pressure on from below to make sure that happens, that we have that Greek-style resistance in terms of it. I also think it's a government which is full of contradictions. I'm not sure how long it will last. There is a big corruption scandal. Already within a week of the new government, one of its key ministers had to resign because he was found taking money from expenses, fraudulently taking money for expenses. That's a big political scandal. It's not gone away in Britain. And that is leading people to question the sort of democracy we have in Britain, where MPs, members of parliament, are lining their own pockets very openly. And I think there is a questioning now of how democracy functions, not just in Britain, but across the world, and what other forms of democracy there could be. And that for me is an interesting question because it opens up alternative visions of the world and how we could run things better. And believe you me, I do believe we could run things better.